The story of Kashner. Kashner was born of giants, but he was never destined to be one of them. The son of King Thargrim of Skalgard, ruler of the Highland Goliath clans, Kashner was the runt of the litter. Where his siblings towered like mountains, Kashner barely reached their waists. His frame was slight, his voice quiet, and his spirit more curious than fierce. To the Goliaths of Skalgard, strength was everything, and Kashner, try as he might, had none. The chieftains whispered of curses. The clan's shamans blamed the stars for his weakness. His siblings mocked him endlessly, calling him Stone Chip, a cruel twist on the Goliath, belief that they were carved from the same unyielding granite as the mountains. Only his mother, Ilvara, looked on him with love, but her affection could not shield him from his father's wrath. King Thargrim was a legend among the Goliaths, his strength unmatched, his voice booming like an avalanche. He had no patience for weakness, and Kashner was a wound upon his pride. For years he endured the boy's presence with gritted teeth, hoping he might grow into something resembling a Goliath. But by Kashner's 16th winter, it was clear he would not. "You are no son of mine," Thargrim growled one bitter morning, his voice echoing across the stone halls of Skalgard. "You shame the blood of giants. Leave this place and do not return." Kashner stood there, his small hands clenched into fists, trembling with a mix of fear and anger. He looked to his mother, who wept silently, unable to defy her king. Without another word, Kashner turned and walked out into the snow, his head held high even as his heart broke. The wilderness outside Skalgard was unforgiving. The peaks of the Titan's teeth loomed overhead, their jagged spires piercing the gray sky. The wind howled like a living thing, tearing at Kashner's thin frame. He had no weapons, no provisions, only the clothes on his back and the fire of his pride. For days he wandered aimlessly, surviving on scraps of snowberries and melted ice. The cold gnawed at him, and the loneliness pressed in like the weight of a mountain. He thought of his family, the roaring feasts, the laughter of his siblings, his mother's warm embrace, and wondered if he had been a fool to leave with his dignity intact. But each time he faltered, he remembered his father's scornful eyes and forced himself to press on. It was on the 7th day that he stumbled into a clearing, his body weak and his spirit near broken. At its center stood a lone fir tree, ancient and gnarled, its roots breaking through the frozen ground. Beneath its boughs lay a peculiar sight, a fox, sleek and silver-furred, caught in a cruel iron trap. Its leg was mangled, but its eyes burned with a fierce intelligence as it watched Kashner approach. Carefully he knelt beside the creature. "Easy now," he whispered, his voice shaking. He had seen his siblings deal with trapped animals before. They would have killed it without a second thought. But Kashner couldn't bring himself to do it. Instead, he worked the trap open with trembling fingers, ignoring the fox's growls and snapping jaws. When the trap finally gave way, the fox bolted a few steps before collapsing in the snow. It turned to look at him, its sharp eyes meeting his, and for a moment, Kashner thought he saw something almost human in its gaze. "You're welcome," he said with a weak smile, lying back against the tree. He closed his eyes, too tired to move, and soon drifted into unconsciousness. When he awoke, the fox was gone. But in its place was something strange, a bundle of sticks tied with red thread, resting beside a small pile of berries. Kashner stared at the offering in confusion, then looked around the clearing. There were no tracks in the snow, no sign of who or what had left it. Taking the bundle, he found it could be fashioned into a crude spear, and the berries, though bitter, gave him strength. With his new weapon, Kashner began to hunt small game, his sharp mind compensating for his lack of strength. He crafted traps from fallen branches, wove cloaks from animal pelts, and built shelters from snow and stone. Slowly, he learned to survive. The days turned to weeks, and Kashner grew lean but resilient. He discovered an uncanny ability to notice things others might overlook, the faintest animal tracks, the whisper of wind through the trees, the shimmer of hidden dangers. It was as if the wilderness itself had taken him under its wing, guiding him where his family had failed. Months later, Kashner stood at the edge of a sheer cliff, overlooking the vast expanse of the world below. He was no longer the trembling boy cast out from Skalgard. His clothes were stitched from wolf fur, his spear gleamed with obsidian he had shaped himself, and his eyes burned with the quiet determination of someone who had forged his own path. The fox appeared beside him, silent as a shadow. Its leg had healed, though it bore a faint scar where the trap had bitten. It sat on its haunches, watching him with the same piercing gaze as before. "Guess we're both survivors," Kashner said softly, reaching down to scratch behind its ears. The fox leaned into his touch, its eyes closing for a moment before it turned and bounded into the forest. Kashner smiled, the first genuine smile he had felt in months. He turned back to the horizon, the wind ruffling his hair. He might have been cast out by the Goliaths, but he was not defeated. He had carved a place for himself in the wild, and he would continue to grow, not as a Goliath, but as Kashner the Small among giants.